Welcome to the FarmBits podcast.
FarmBits is proudly produced by the Nebraska Digital Agriculture team and hosted by students at the University of Nebraska.
The FarmBits podcast comes to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews with experts, producers, and innovators from across the agriculture industry, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital ag technology.
Hello, FarmBits followers, and welcome to another episode of the FarmBits podcast. I'm Cesario.
And I'm Katie Bathke, and we are glad to have you with us as we are joined by the Business Development Manager at Autonomous Pivot, Daniel Jenkins.
To the Autonomous Pivot, Daniel works with producers to support the implementation and benefits of digital agriculture technologies for irrigation.
With that in mind, let's hear more from Daniel.
All right. So thanks, Daniel, for joining us on this episode from FarmBits. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to join Autonomous Pivot?
Yeah, sure. My name is Daniel Jenkins. I'm the head of sales in North America for the company Autonomous Pivot. I'm originally from Kentucky, and in 2015, I married my wife and moved to Israel, and had lived and worked in Israel for the last 7 years. I worked in commercial irrigation. Israel is a very leading company when it comes to irrigation. They've pioneered drip tape, a lot of gray water reclamation, desalinization. It's a very pressing problem that they are forced to solve. And so as a result, I really got an advanced course in irrigation in Israel. And then had my daughter and another one on the way, and thought I need to find a way to put to use all this knowledge that I've acquired in the field. And so I had the option to interview with Autonomous Pivot, and immediately just fell in love with the vision of the company, with what they're trying to do, how they're endeavoring to really revolutionize row crop farming across the world. And so, I came on board last May. I got to I'm here in Wichita which is where our production facilities are. And last May I was able to assemble sensors, go out and install systems, actually in about a dozen fields across Nebraska. And then got to work with producers across the country that were using our solution in the off season. And then with frequent travel, it became pretty clear that if I wanted to see my family more than a couple of weeks out of the month, I would need to be in the States. And so we relocated in May. This is my second season with Autonomous Pivot, and loving every minute of it.
Awesome. So can you kind of shift that into giving us an overview of what Autonomous Pivot is and how that company started?
Yes. So I'll tell you, the company's been around since 2018. That was our kind of first proof of concept, and we've come a long way from there. But the real genesis of the company came from the challenge of making an accurate irrigation recommendation with insufficient data. Having one point in the field or a couple of points in the field, the more data that you have, the better your analysis can be, and that analysis leads to a better recommendation. And so the idea was, how do we optimize data collection in row crop fields? And so there sits the pivot. For most of the growing season, it's rotating without stopping at times. And it just seemed kind of intuitive that we should use that to be more than just the means of applying irrigation or fertilizer or chemical, but convert that, retrofit that to where it's actually the means of data collection. So that's what we've done at Autonomous Pivot. We've built a reliable platform for data collection through the pivot. We do that with our proprietary sensors and cameras. And so the system is mounted with 2 cameras, just RGB at this point, but 2 cameras, a narrow lens and a wide angle lens that allows us to see both a bird's eye view of the field, and the narrow camera allows us to see sub-millimeter features on the crop. So continuous in-field monitoring with imagery. We supplement that with our ground penetrating radar. So that sits on a boom, a 15-foot boom out in front of the irrigation footprint. So we're reading dry soil ahead of the previous application. And that gives us insights into the efficiency of the previous application, lets us know if how we're trending, if we're gaining water, losing water, and helps to close the loop on our calculus for what the crop is using and what the soil is losing. The cameras also have a GPS component, a wireless gateway that's able to upload that to the cloud, LoRaWAN connectivity for our on-location rain bucket. So rain, as we know this year, is the most valuable and variable input that your fields are going to get. And so you may have a rain bucket at the shop, you may have a local rain bucket a few miles away, but the variability for rainfall can be immense. And so, we don't have them scattered multiple throughout the field, which of course, on a quarter section, you can have variability even within the field itself. But generally we put it at the center of the pivot, and it gives us real-time rain data for that specific location. So by tracking the pivot and its application with our pressure transducer and GPS, by tracking rainfall, we're able to know exactly how much moisture is going into the field. We're using the cameras to verify crop growth stage and refine our ET calculation for what the crop is using and what the soil is losing. We also have web services through DTN that provide precision weather data for all the data points that we need to make that ET calculus, solar radiation, wind direction, speed, relative humidity, temperature. And so while we're not calculating everything that you need to know in the field, I feel like we're calculating way more than our competitors. And that ultimately allows us to give a superior analysis of soil moisture in the field, and ultimately a better recommendation for the crop irrigation. And our slogan is more than just irrigation. So as we go forward, we look to leverage the imagery and other sensors that we're working on to provide more solutions than just when and how much to irrigate.
Yeah, Daniel. Yeah, it's been really right here, and it's important we have this data collection more accurate so we can have better decisions in the field, right? I agree with you on that. And yeah, you mentioned some of the features that your products have there, right, from the company. And but what are the different products that Autonomous Pivot offers and the benefits of each to your customers? We also see that you guys have some companies' websites that alerts about some crop pests and disease. Is that correct? Can you expand a little bit on
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we don't have a wide catalog of products. The challenge with a startup is there's so many things that you can do and so many ways that you can apply your technology that at times it can be the death of 1,000 paper cuts if you start to do this, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So we've tried to maintain laser focus in our system and what it offers. And so with the exception of a few minor alterations, The completed system with the GPR, the cameras, the rain bucket, and the pressure transducer is what we offer by being able to monitor, as I said, all of those different data points, and to do that with a systems approach, as opposed to just using one tool for data collection, having multiple sensors that are able to reference each other, adjust, augment each other, confirm each other. We really feel that we have a better solution there. So specifically, what do we offer to our growers? While I believe personally that our system has a place on every pivot in North America, there are several instances that are a real no-brainer for the implementation of our system. Some of those would be remote monitoring. We have growers in Nebraska that have fields that are 55, 60 miles away from where they live. And so in a year like this, where fuel is a cost that really must be considered in how we maintain our budgets, this particular grower has, told us that it saved him many miles in his pickup and many hours of second guessing to be able to see remotely real-time moisture conditions, crop conditions, to know when the pivot's running, if it's stuck, if there's any issues. It's been a godsend for him, I would believe he would say. We also have the benefit of larger fields, being able to manage more acreage with one system, being able to put one system in a section where you have multiple fields and you're able to spread out that ROI with multiple fields. And then obviously with higher value crops, we've done more work this year with potato growers, and had a grower once tell me that our system was just 10,000 pounds of potatoes. And that seemed like a lot to me, but he was using it like, oh, this is nothing, just 10,000 pounds of potatoes. So yeah, remote monitoring, maximizing acreage in a given area, and then higher value crops are really a no-brainer for the implementation of our system.
That's really neat. Can you tell us, like, specifically if autonomous pivot was designed for any crop or one in particular, kind of how that works?
Yeah, excuse me. So I'm here in Wichita, Kansas, and this is where the system was pioneered and designed, and we built the system for corn and soybeans. Those were the first two crops that we supported. But as the company's grown and we've realized the value of implementing our system in other crops, we have expanded to cover potatoes. We did some trials last year in onions. We also do significant work in alfalfa, which can be a challenge with using a static soil moisture probe and the frequent cutting and harvesting. And we also do sorghum, wheat. We did some trials this year in barley as well. So really, as we go forward, we intend to increase that catalog as well of supported crop types. But as you corn huskers know, the corn and beans market is really our bread and butter, and that's where we've begun and where we focused, and that's where most of our systems are implemented in.
That's great, Daniel. And could you tell us, like, what are the critical problems that demand a real-time irrigation solution between these systems that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think the way that we look at a field being irrigated, whether it's a larger field, a smaller field, one with more soil variability, one that's more consistent, what we're always looking for is what hasn't been irrigated yet. And so the point of the field that's longest since it was irrigated is where you're going to see stress, where you're going to see issues. And I feel like that's the benefit of our system is, while our system is in a fixed location on the pivot, so we're always measuring in the same relative location, we're always moving around and we're always monitoring the portion of the field that is longest since it was last irrigated. So it gives you a real insight. And I would say that it's kind of a challenge, as I've worked with lots of producers, to educate the community of interest, because a lot of our growers have used soil moisture probes in the past, and they're used to seeing those peaks and valleys of when the pivot passes over the probe. And there is some useful data that can be gained from those probes. But what you'll see with our system, and what you should see, what we would hope to see, is a much more consistent measurement throughout the field. Because you're always in the same location, you're always measuring out in front of the irrigation. Only after a rain event will you see it peak and then start to dry. And so I would say that measuring correctly, measuring what it needs to be irrigated, and being able to use a more efficient calculation to where you're applying just enough, just in time, you're allowing for healthy aerobic processes to happen in the soil. That's key in going forward. So measuring in the right spot is definitely something that we provide. Doing that all around the field is a bonus. And then I would say, and we know this, we've seen this season for sure, after a rain event, how do we begin? When do we start irrigating? How much did we get in that location? Where was our soil moisture before the rain fell? So how much of that rain was actually effective rainfall to be used by the crop? These are all questions that the grower has to wrestle with. And unfortunately, the common solution when you're in doubt is better be safe than sorry. And so we see growers that a lot of times will just continue irrigating in the rain if it's not enough for them to shut it off, or if it is enough for them to shut it off, they will do so for 12 or 24 hours and then fire it right back up. The only way to combat that mentality is with sufficient data, reliable data, abundant data, to really give a counterpoint to the fear mentality, or the cautious mentality of, I don't want to get behind. And so we enable that with our growers by showing them how much rain exactly fell in the field, where the soil moisture was. We also issue essentially a forecast of soil moisture. So if you don't irrigate, these are your drying trends. So that gives them the information they need to be able to make that decision to leave that pivot off for another 6 or 12 hours. And at times, that's the real critical saving that we can offer. Throughout the season, we're not going to tell you, oh, shut your pivot off for, the next 2 weeks and, go to the beach. But those key hours at key times of, you can there's sufficient soil moisture, you can shut it down for 6 hours, you can shut it down for 12 hours. That's the saving that's most beneficial. And then another key point of our system is it can be mounted and installed today. You finished harvesting your field, you can go out and put our system up and it'll already begin to provide useful data points from the field. So at a time when you would never have data from a soil moisture probe, or it would require you to go out consistently and manually probe it yourself, our system can be out there in the field providing data for that early season irrigation recommendation. So I think with this year, with the minimal rainfall that fell between October and April. A lot of growers started to irrigate sooner than they had in the past. And I hope that this is an outlier year meteorologically, that we'll get much more rainfall and soon. But discretionary irrigation passes early on in the season, discretionary passes towards the end of the season as you're finishing the crop, those are also a benefit of our system as well.
Daniel, you did a great job of explaining kind of how the benefits of autonomous pivot really come out through your trials. Can you now talk us a little bit about how the autonomous pivot products need to be programmed to achieve these benefits you previously mentioned?
Yeah, so our system is not plug and play. Just start with that point right there. You can't go grab our system off the shelf and go throw it in your field and expect it to start working like you would another product. So that, of course, is a challenge for us, but we've made progresses in how we get data from the grower about the field that helps to fill in for some key constant data points in our algorithm as we calculate what our sensor data is showing in the field. So yeah, we have an extensive questionnaire, if you will, a field form that we go over with each of our growers. That's at times it's questions that they don't even know the answers to, that they have to go and look in some cabinet or file for. But really to understand the pivot itself, what's its capability, how much is it applying, what are its speeds. This is all information that we use in order to recommend irrigations. So not just your soil type and how much water it can hold, not just your crop type and how much it's using, but your specific machine, how much can it apply and how quickly, and what's its pacing, and how can we maximize, again, that aerobic process in the soil of healthy wetting and drying, that's going to maximize nutrient uptake, that's going to provide the needed stresses for a healthier crop. So that information is a challenge and sometimes hard to get from the grower, but it's something that we really work on even throughout the season. If we start to see issues with data, that's the first place we go back to check and see maybe there's an error in here in this information that was provided. And ultimately every year we're refining our questionnaire and that field form and making it more efficient for collecting data from the grower.
Yeah, no, that's neat, Daniel. And you mentioned some of the growers and its difference between their systems, right? But what are some of the characteristics of operations that these early adopters growers of the autonomous pivot tech?
Yeah, so larger operations that have many pivots and that need to be monitored, operations that have a commitment to sustainability, that actually report and provide that information to a third party or to a corporate entity. This is how much I applied this year. This is how much rain fell. Collecting that data can be tedious, and a lot of growers have their notepad or whatever that they've been writing this down and then putting that into an Excel file and sending it off, and so they see the benefit of our system and that we're collecting all that data for them. We prepare all that data and can send it to whomever they would like. Just as far as tracking and monitoring, it's a huge benefit. Again, more remote operations. So if I have 20 miles, 30 miles from one field to the next. I think our system begins to offer cost savings as far as fuel efficiency and monitoring to be able to alleviate one visit a week. It can be 75, $100 of fuel. That's already half the price of our system across the season, just if you're able to save one trip. And that's before even taking into account what we could save with irrigation or with crop health monitoring through the cameras or any of our other features that we offer. So remote monitoring, larger operations with sustainability, accountability, let's say, and then always progressive farmers that are looking for ways to solve problems with technology. We definitely can and do that. And then there's also the labor shortage component of, as we go forward, there are fewer and fewer 30 and 40-year veterans when it comes to crop consultants and agronomists and just field workers as well. So finding ways to offset that labor shortage with technology is always going to be something that growers need to be on the lookout for. How can I implement technology to overcome a shortcoming that with labor? So
Thank you. I think right now we'd like to take a deeper dive into the autonomous pivot platform. So we have a couple, like a series of questions here.
Okay.
What technologies does autonomous pivot use to help irrigation management? Like which kind of sensors does it need? Does it account for spatial variability? What are some of the parameters autonomous pivot utilizes to support farmers and irrigation advisors on decision making? And then what are kind of some of these challenges that come with the platform when tracking and reporting water metrics? If you could just expand on any of those, that'd be great.
So I can talk a little bit more about our sensors if you'd like.
Yeah.
When you look at our system, the first thing that, the thing that I hear a lot from growers is my friend drove by the field and called me and said, "You got something hanging off the front of your pivot." What's that thing hanging off the front of your pivot? And so that thing hanging off the front of the pivot is our ground penetrating radar. So I don't know if you're familiar with ground penetrating radar or not. It's technology that's been around since the 70s, if not a bit before. It's primarily been used in the detection of oil and natural gas. But this specific iteration was developed by a technology institute in New Zealand. It's specifically formatted for agricultural purposes. And so a little bit about radar and antennas. The signal that they emit is directly proportionate to their size and shape, the orientation of the antenna array. That's why you'll see taller, 300, 400, 500 foot antenna towers for Air Force bases that send out a huge signal. Ours is not that big. We believe that it's at a size that makes it manageable for the field. It easily navigates even through densely populated, densely planted corn. It's got some lateral give with the sensor. And so it's able to navigate through those cornfields. But essentially it's taking a reading up to 24 inches. We consistently read 18 inches, the top 18 inches of soil. And it reads essentially a cubic meter of soil. And again, the benefit of our system is not that it's reading, 3 feet in one point, because it's not. The benefit of our system is that it's reading all around the field. So the way that the system is designed is essentially every half an hour, the system wakes up, takes a reading with the GPR, takes images with the cameras, fetches data from the rain bucket, checks a pressure transducer, and then all of that gets uploaded to the cloud. And so every half an hour for for a cornfield, it's a pretty high refresh rate. We don't have any ambitions of live streaming your cornfield because, let's be honest, things don't happen that fast in corn growing. But we believe that every 30 minutes, it's providing key data. And again, our system it's mounted on the pivot. It doesn't go home at 5. It doesn't take the weekend off. It doesn't need, a vacation or, anything like that. It's mounted on the pivot, and it's there. It's monitoring continuously throughout the season. So the other benefit, I guess I would say, kind of hit on it earlier, is the redundancy that we have built into our system. So we're taking readings with the GPR, but we have eyes on the field with the camera. So we're able to affirm, we're able to adjust. If we're seeing, really, really wet readings with our GPR, is that what we're seeing with our cameras as well? If it's showing really, really dry, are we seeing early signs of crop stress as well? Again, that's the benefit of our system, and using a systems approach, not just looking for one sensor to provide all the data, but augmenting them with multiple sensors and multiple data points is a key benefit of our system. I think there was a question about spatial variability.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on that. Feel free to elaborate as well if you'd like.
Yeah, so I mean, as we look ahead to the future of agriculture and full VRI with solenoids on every valve and opening, closing all up and down the pivot, we don't really have a solution for that yet. We find that the cost-effective solution is one system per irrigation pivot. So we mount that generally, if there's not some other extenuating circumstance, we mount that at the end of the second to last tower. So that gives us the greatest possible circumference without reading at the edge of the field and getting deviations because of edge effect and things of that nature. We're about 20-25 feet in from the pivot track. So we're reading undisrupted soil right in the middle of the field. And again, we're reading that from hundreds of data points all around the circle. Because we're in a fixed location and we can only see one donut or one ring of the field, if you will, we do offset that by implementing twice a season aerial imagery. And so we partner with Series Imaging for fixed wing aerial flights twice a season with NDVI and thermal imaging, their full package. And that's really useful because while we're monitoring our portion of the field continually, we're not able to see the inner spans, we're not able to see the last span. So we do offset that twice a season, generally around V6 to V8. That's early enough where if there is some crop stress because of an irrigation issue, you can get out there and get it remedied before it would start to impact reproductive growth. And then later on, we'll do it after tassel to check for canopy closure and more pervasive issues in the field through NDVI. But yeah, we've been, when those aerial images detect something, it pays for our system immediately. Being able to go out there and fix a plug nozzle or a certain tower that's not getting pressure, that's it. That just saved you, substantial loss that season. So in the future, we have entertained the ideas of mounting several sensors along a certain pivot. But again, it's always a cost benefit analysis of is data from further in as beneficial? Do I need to know every tower, how efficiently we're irrigating? So it's always a question, and we're always looking to, explore and potentially solve that. But right now we believe we have a sweet spot of data collection being there at the end of the second to last tower.
Yeah, it's amazing how these sensors can help us to do some predictions and better managing our farmers. And we know that each farmer is like specifically, right, if the technology pays off or not. So
Right.
we have always to consider that. But when you mentioned like how these sensors collect the data for you guys, but how does that come to the farmer? Does they take the decision, or do you guys have a recommendation? How does that work?
Yeah, so all of the information that we collect with our sensors ultimately is presented in our app, Autonomous Pivot. We have tabs for soil moisture that show our water balance calculations, that show our GPR readings, that shows an active pressure graph across time. We have a tab for our images, where each of those images is tagged with its GPS location. So if there's something detected in an image, you can go specifically to that location for a better use of your time in scouting. We have our weather tab that's taking the precision weather data and showing the ET forecast and crop usage. It's also showing predicted rain events that are coming. We have a tab for our aerial imagery as well. And then ultimately, we have our recommendations tab. So this is where we have a recommendation for the grower. Turn your pivot on at this time, run it at this speed. It will apply this amount, do it for this amount of hours. And then this year we were able to implement a download feature as well, where you can download that recommendation as a speed table and then upload that into your pivot controller to be able to run your pivot. So we don't have our own proprietary pivot controller. We may build one. It's always better if you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we may just look for further collaboration to partner with existing pivot controllers. That being said, we have made progress with a few of the larger pivot controllers as far as API integration, to where you can see our data in that pivot controller app. And I would say that we're on the precipice of, through that integration, the grower getting an update and saying, this is your current soil moisture, this is your predicted weather for the week, this is your crop in its growth stage, this is our irrigation recommendation for the week. Would you agree? Would you like to edit? And by the click of a button, that would then, port over and begin to run the pivot. So we're not there yet, but we're very close, and it'll be exciting, and can't wait for that time when we are running the pivot autonomously. We set the bar high for ourselves with the name of our company. Actually, we even had some first-year customers last year that said, "You're autonomous pivot. Why aren't you running my pivot autonomously?" Which was kind of a surprise, because mostly growers are skeptical, and they wouldn't hand over the keys to anybody, much less somebody they hardly know, and say, "Here, irrigate my cornfield for the whole season." But we definitely realized that that's the name that we've given ourselves, and that's the goal for our company, that one day we would autonomously run the pivot. So it's on the roadmap, and we're making good progress towards that goal.
I think that's exciting how you kind of shared what your ultimate goal and what you really want to see this company come forth as. So can you give us a little bit about kind of what are the most significant weaknesses and how you guys are truly aiming to improve them?
Yeah. So what we saw this season, again, was, the challenge of getting accurate data from the grower about the field. It's, we aim to save our growers time. That time should not be spent filling out tedious questionnaires for us. That time shouldn't be spent on the phone with us figuring out, what's going on. And so we're always working to improve the ease of use for collecting that data, for having local representatives that would go out and meet with you and look at the pivot and maybe even turn it on and take some measurements and see exactly what's needed to install our sensors. So that, of course, is a challenge that we've been working on for many years, and we'll continue. I don't know that we'll ever fully solve it because it's a human question, but we make adjustments every year. We streamline, we improve, we make it more efficient. We built an engine this year to pull soil data from USDA maps to fill in for soil type questions that maybe the grower didn't have information for. We're working with the integration of different soil mapping technologies into our system as well. So I would say that that's definitely one of them. Another challenge is, we have a physical sensor in the field, and so it, requires maintenance and at times, and was surprised and impressed by the reliability of our systems this year and how little intervention was involved. But we're always working to make those sensors more resilient, more robust, to make them more efficient right from the get-go. And yeah, I think, working with local interested parties is also a key going forward. Having someone that's not just in Wichita or in Israel, but having somebody that's, down the road that you can turn to if you have a question as well. And so we are looking to, strengthen our existing channels and find new distribution partners in areas that we're not quite as present in yet. So, and then, continuing to refine our sensor technology. What we've done is built a reliable platform for data collection. And this year we were able to integrate the pressure transducer that gave us more information, but we're always looking ahead to, what's the next feature? What's the next sensor? How can we improve what we already have? How can we make our camera unit better? How can we improve our GPR technology? Our rain bucket is awesome when there's rain to measure, but there's only so much we can do. But yeah, we're dedicated to consistent growth and improvement, and this is what we do, and this is what we're going to continue to do. And so finding ways to make it better and more efficient is always going to be our priority.
You mentioned that you guys are trying to refine these technologies and all the sensors in the field, but for those growers that are interested on implementing a platform like that, is there a minimum requirement that they need, like about the technology that they should have already in the field, or some equipment that they should have?
Well, you do have to have a center pivot irrigation system.
That's important.
That is one. So Katie, unfortunately, for dry land corn, we do not yet have a solution. And again, the ag space is so vast. This may be, this is my opinion, but I don't think there's ever going to be one silver bullet solution for every crop in every field and every geography. And that's the benefit and the challenge when you develop a product. But we've taken it to heart, and we've really tried to embrace, this is where our system thrives. So irrigated row crops under pivot that's what we're doing. We're not looking to expand into vineyards or orchards or dryland areas right now. Who knows, 10, 15 years in the future, we may have a solution for that as well, but we're trying to focus on what we're doing and do it better than anyone else. And I believe that's where we're at right now. The requirements beyond that, you do need a smartphone or a computer. We're not going to mail you our pictures and recommendations. And then beyond that, I believe that if you've got a pivot and you've got a smartphone or a computer, our system can be of value to you.
Awesome. Can you share any advice you have for our listeners considering making significant irrigation management decisions?
Yeah, use autonomous pivot. No, I mean, that's the short answer. The more elaborative answer is there are so many factors that go into that decision-making process. It's not just about what your soil moisture is in one point in the field. It's not just about how much rain you got at the shop. In order to make the best decision, you need as much data as you can, because there's always that inclination to irrigate in times of doubt. And unless you have something to counter that apprehension or counter that fear, you're probably just going to continue to run the pivot. So find solutions that are convenient for you, that you understand, that work with your management style, and use data to make that decision. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about farming this year or next year, but our goal is that we can farm efficiently and sustainably that would allow for agriculture to continue and thrive for generations to come.
I love that. And we have one last question for you. If someone wanted to learn more about your company and its products, where should they go to find out more?
Yeah, so you can reach us on the web, autonomouspivot.com. That'll take you to the website. If you have any questions, you can send an email to info@autonomouspivot.com. There's also a portion there on the website. You can check us out on Twitter. Just yesterday, there was a little news blurb from Nebraska TV. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but featuring our system out near Grand Island, just how our system is being used with farmers to save and make better management decisions. So, and then, yeah, find us on the web.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Yes, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
My pleasure. Thank you all for having me and for doing this podcast and getting info out about meaningful technologies for growers.
yeah, no, that's amazing. The work you guys are doing there. Thanks for the time. Thank you very much to Daniel for taking the time to join this episode of the FarmBits podcast. It's really exciting to hear his perspective and knowledge focused around how to use data collection for improving irrigation management. One of my favorite parts of this episode is how these sensors are helping growers to better predict irrigation rates on their systems, besides only considering the drought seasons.
I agree. But my favorite part is when Daniel talks about how the data collection can improve water use efficiency, sustainability, and the overall cost efficiency of each operation. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to sharing another digital ag story with you next week on FarmBits.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the review sections of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.